Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today's topic is on yogurt. So I opened up the fridge and had a lot of questions this week about yogurt. And my nieces and nephews also had questions about it. They mostly wanted to know what is the best type. And since they're only about 8 years old, they assure me that that answer is peach. But today we're going to talk about what yogurt really is, the different types of yogurt, as well as the role of probiotics in yogurt as it relates to gut health and yeast infections. And then stick around to the end when we talk about the top best probiotic yogurts. So, as usual, first up, what even is yogurt? I know that it's made from milk, but I'm not a big fan of dairy. Not even for health and wellness reasons, but I've just never enjoyed the taste of milk, even as a kid, and I haven't ever really enjoyed most forms of yogurt. I'm a lot more likely to put it on my face than in my face. So I wanted to learn some more about this. I'm more of a cheese person. I know a lot about cheese, not a lot about yogurt. But I have heard that there are a lot of health benefits to yogurt. So how is it made? Well, it is definitely a milk product, and they make it by fermenting some specific microorganisms in the milk. And that's normally just going to be those probiotics that we think of. So remember that probiotics are these living strains of microorganisms, and that's why it a lot of times says lactobacillus and then whatever other name afterwards. So lactobacillus, that's generally going to be its genus, and then the word that comes after that in all lowercase is the species, and sometimes also the subspecies of that microorganism. So they need to be live, viable, active cultures, and there should be a lot of them inside of the yogurt to be considered yogurt. Yogurt is made a couple of different ways, but in general, there is either set yogurt or stirred yogurt. They start out the same way though. We also have Greek yogurt, low-fat yogurt, no-fat yogurt, the creamy kind, the kind that you can drink, the bio yogurt, frozen yogurt. There are very many ways to get your yogurt intake. But the basic ingredients and the way it's manufactured all at least start out the same. First, you take raw milk and you take that over to the manufacturer from the farm. Once the milk is there, they go ahead and standardize it and pasteurize it. So think of it as heating up the milk to be about 176 degrees Fahrenheit or 80 degrees Celsius, and that homogenizes it. Pasteurization is important for helping to eliminate any pathogens that may otherwise be in the milk, and it also extends the shelf life. So that is the purpose of pasteurization and the intent. When we say homogenized, we mean that the milk is subjected to a process that emulsifies the fat droplets and doesn't separate the cream from it. So essentially, when you are homogenizing something, you get one of these two liquids, the milk portion, the liquidy portion, and then the cream. And then you are getting them, one of the liquids, the cream, to be very small. And so these particles of it are distributed uniformly throughout the other liquid, the milk, or the more watery portion of this. So you're taking those fats and making them small enough to be evenly distributed so that the solution that you're left with afterwards, the milk, is really the same texture or mouthfeel kind of throughout, because normally the cream is going to rise to the top. But in milk that has been homogenized, it's going to be a little bit different in appearance. It's closer to what most people are used to when they get milk from the grocery store than if you have ever had raw milk. I grew up on a farm, so I've seen both of them and have had both raw milk and pasteurized and homogenized milk. It's a little bit different, but it's not really all that different from what you might think. So once we have this milk pasteurized and homogenized, then the milk has to cool back down since we heat it up in the pasteurization process. And then they add in the fermentation culture. And when we say culture, we mean bacteria, these probiotics. So they add that in at about a 2% concentration. This generally is 2 different lactic acid bacteria. One is Streptococcus thermophilus and Lactobacillus delbrueckii subspecies bulgaricus. So these are the specific ferments of yogurt. This is what helps yogurt to have the flavor and consistency and the health benefits of being a probiotic material that can enhance your gut health and digestion, and it also gives it some of that scent too. So once this is cooled down and the fermentation culture is in there, then they put in the fruit and the sugar and any of the other ingredients to change the flavor a little bit or to give it, just make it more palatable, really. Folks who are also not into yogurt, like I'm not, you might know what I'm talking about. A lot of times, for me, yogurt feels kind of chalky or tastes kind of chalky. It's part mouthfeel and part flavor for me. I'm just not super into it. Maybe I'm missing out by not trying other types of yogurt, but I'm honestly not even that much of a frozen yogurt girl. Sorry, guys. I do like custard. I'll give you that. But I'm not that into yogurt. So I totally understand why folks would add more fruit and other ingredients to it. But remember, we are not wanting to add a lot of sugar into our foods. We want to kind of stick with the sugars that are already naturally in there. So pay attention to that on your labels. Once that product is cooled, then they can store it at refrigeration temperatures. So in the US, we refer to that as being 40 degrees Fahrenheit down to, 33 degrees Fahrenheit. Not enough to freeze it, but enough to keep it cool and keep the bacteria that's not great at bay. And overseas, and literally pretty much everywhere else in the world, 5 degrees Celsius is what they're referring to. And that slows down the degradation of your yogurt at the physical, chemical, and microbiological levels. So it makes sure that those good bacteria, those cultures that we've intentionally put into the yogurt in the fermentation process, are still actively in there and are able to still do their jobs. There's a little bit of a difference between set yogurt and stirred yogurt, but it's really not all that different. They ferment in different ways. Some ferment in tanks, like for stirred yogurt, and then set yogurt can sometimes ferment in an oven, but they both have to go through the cooling process and cold storage and conditioning. For stirred yogurt, conditioning tends to happen just before cold storage, but after all the other processes. And with set yogurt, conditioning happens first and cold storage still happens last. I also, as an anthropologist, was very curious about how yogurt has been eaten. As a fermented food, I strongly suspected it had been around for a very long time. So for things like beer and wine and yogurt, and even medicines like penicillin that derived from being mold growing on different foods. A lot of it is just foods that weren't stored properly or were kept a little bit longer than normal, and we accidentally stumbled upon the fact that we could make these other food products just by letting things sit a little bit longer or by introducing another agent into the process. And yogurt is very much an ancient food, just like beer. The first types of yogurt are found to have been between 5,000 BCE and 10,000 BCE. So that is short for before the Common Era. So somewhere around 10,000 and 5,000 BCE, then we were finding yogurt. And I think this was in the Neolithic period. And that's when folks were making that transition from being primarily nomadic to then turning more towards agriculture. So they were getting more of a sedentary lifestyle. They were able to store more foods, right? Because you have somewhere to put it. Things get heavy if you're carrying it along a lot. And anyone who has, at the very least, played video games knows what I'm talking about. So even if you haven't been backpacking, you know that your character can only carry so much stuff, and that it normally weighs a lot, or that is also represented by how many inventory slots that you have. So once you are able to settle down, you have more room for junk to accumulate. And that means you can set your yogurt pot down, forget about it for a little bit, or rather you're like your milk cup, and then pick it up later, and voila, you have yogurt. So during the time of the transition to agriculture in this Neolithic period, a lot of these populations were not just learning how to grow plants of their own and wheat and everything and to harvest these things seasonally, but they were also learning to domesticate different animals. So a lot of those were goats, cows, buffalo, yaks, camels, all of these creatures that could produce milk. So in that time, there were herdsmen in the Middle East who were using animal guts to make bags that were specifically for transporting milk. So this is a very common thing that used to be done, where you would take out the animal guts and then you would clean them, and they're waterproof and everything by nature. So then you can go ahead and carry around your different liquid products in it. The intestinal enzymes, though, were still in contact with the milk back then, and that could have caused the milk to curdle and or sour. But milk like that was a bit easier to carry, and the first yogurt very likely also was. Think about putting pudding into a balloon rather than water, and how that might feel different in your hand. The pudding is going to feel closer to a stress ball, and the water is going to feel a lot more jiggly. Very similar to yogurt and to milk. So this helped a bit with transportation, and the changes that were in that milk structure might have really given folks a clue that we could store a dairy product for longer and still be able to eat it if it was transported in such a way. And then over the years, we got yogurt. It made its way from 10,000 to 5,000 BCE all the way up into what we know of it in Western Europe in the 16th century, when the King of France, Francois I, was given yogurt as a treatment for severe diarrhea by a doctor who was from Turkey. So that is how it made its way into Western Europe as far as we know, and then moved over into Western culture. But this is very much a product that was believed to have initiated in the African continent and the Middle East. We also started converting lactose in milk to lactic acid thanks to starter cultures over the years that helped to prevent milk from pathogens. But we did that before we even actually knew about bacteria per se. So they started doing this by injecting fresh milk. They refer to it as inoculating because you're applying bacterial cultures to it. So they would inoculate this fresh milk with little bits of sour milk. And so by putting that fermented milk in there, it would help transform it for us and to safely preserve milk. That was a very important component for people's gut health improving, and we didn't need to know about bacteria for that. All that we needed to know is that if you have diarrhea and you eat yogurt, then you feel better. That's science. You're taking observations about the world around you and forming a hypothesis and then testing those and seeing what comes of it. It's just noticing the world around you. And so I thought it was really interesting that we started using yogurt as this type of probiotic medicine before we even really knew a lot about bacteria. Then in 1909, there was a Nobel Prize winner named Eli Metchnikoff, and he suggested that aging was caused by toxic bacteria in the gut and said that he thought lactic acid could extend life. So he was considered to be a big deal for this. And then through the 20th century, we started intentionally manufacturing yogurt to be sold in a commercial manner. And the first yogurt factory in the West was opened in 1932 in France by someone named Daniel Carasso. And the potential health benefits, especially as purported by this Nobel Prize winner, helped draw so much interest that yogurt was initially sold as a medicine in pharmacies. But today, we just really look at it as a healthy food, and it remains a big part of many diets from around the world. But yogurt is truly an ancient food when it comes down to it. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about types of yogurt and also probiotics. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Made. I love the TV show How It's Made, and so for me, a large part of the fun in doing this podcast with y'all is letting y'all know how things are made, so I get to research it for fun for myself too. So I hope you enjoy learning about what yogurt is and how it's created. And now we're going to talk about the different types. There is a ton of variety of yogurt on the market. I know every time I go to the grocery store, I'm just confronted with an entire wall of this yogurt. And some of it has cookies in it. Some of it has fruit that is already stirred in, or it has fruit on the bottom, or it has things at the top of it that you pour into it like crush-ins or something. But for the most part, the different types of yogurt vary based on the type of milk used, whether that's skimmed, semi-skimmed, or whole milk, and then the addition of cream. And these types of issues are what determine how much fat content that final yogurt product has. So they start with different levels of fat in the milk, and we discussed milk fat in our milk episode. But then later they might go in and add more cream. So that can change the final fat content even if they started with a different type of lower fat milk. When you get that stirred style of yogurt, they ferment that milk in a fermentation tank, then stir up the contents, add in any fruits or flavors as they want, then cool and pack the products to store them in refrigerators. For the set style yogurt I mentioned in the first segment, this is also referred to as the French style, and they inoculate the milk with the ferments and then add in other ingredients like the sugar, flavor, fruits before the packaging. And then the fermentation process occurs in the packages during the incubation period. Then the product is cooled and stored for refrigeration. So for stirred style, it is fermented all together in a tank, then stirred, then the flavors are incorporated, and then it's packaged and stored. But for set style, it's not fermented until it is in the packages. So they just pretty much inoculate the milk with those probiotic strains and then put in all the flavors, stick it in the packages, and let it do its work in the package. So they're not having to necessarily wait in that order. That's not the reason, but I find that to be very interesting, that you can still get very similar products even when you change the order. For anyone who has tried to make macarons, you may know as well as I do that the order matters greatly in baking, especially when it comes to macarons, and it can be very frustrating if anything goes wrong. And just including the order of mixing in the dry ingredients from the wet ingredients. So for me, that's why this is kind of fascinating. If you have the drinking style of yogurt, which is my least favorite type of yogurt out of all of them, but I totally understand why some people might like it. It's just not for me. That doesn't mean that it's bad. So definitely, if you're interested in drinkable yogurt, go and check that out. It can be very beneficial for your gut health. But this drinking yogurt is the stirred type. So not the French style, but the first one that has been fermented in that tank. And it has a low amount of total solids in the content. And it's also undergone that homogenization process to reduce how thick it is. So it's reduced the viscosity. So now it has had those thicker portions blended up more or less into tiny particles and reincorporated more with the regular fluid. So it's not that more pudding-like texture. It's closer to milk or water. Sometimes they add in sweeteners, flavorings, or colorings to it, and then they package that in bottles and get it ready for the shelves. My ex was really into those drinkable yogurts. They always smelled kind of sour to me, and I tried one once and it tasted kind of sour and also still chalky somehow, but he loved them, and the man had really great gut health. So if that sounds like something you're into, go for it. Now, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what sets Greek yogurt apart. Does it come from a specific region in Greece, like Champagne has to in France? Not really. Greek yogurt is just obtained by straining the normal yogurt to get some more of the liquids out, and it gives you a thicker texture. So it's more concentrated as a fermented milk product. And in order to be considered Greek yogurt, the protein content in it has to be at least 5.6 grams per 100 grams of yogurt. So what they're really draining off is the whey or lactose serum. So that is the liquidy part of the milk. And when we think about lactose serum, kind of think about blood serum. So it's that liquid suspension that a lot of the other parts are floating around in. And so they remove that component, and then you have a thicker yogurt that also has a lower lactose content because they've drained out that lactose serum. However, there is not a controlled denomination for Greek yogurt or Greek-style yogurt. So there are local rules that vary from one country to another that regulate what can be called Greek yogurt and what is Greek-style yogurt or what is called strained yogurt, etc. So if you're traveling internationally and you're looking for Greek yogurt, it might well be under a different name. If you read the label, though, that can help you determine if it's really Greek yogurt. We talked a little bit earlier about lactic acid fermentation, and that's the process where milk is converted into yogurt. And the lactic ferments, those two probiotic specimens, Streptococcus thermophilus and Lactobacillus delbrueckii, subspecies bulgaricus, are those two microorganisms that convert those. Lactic acid fermentation is also used to make sauerkraut, or sour beer, or kimchi, my favorite fermented vegetable, but also other fermented vegetables like tempeh. And during this fermentation process, the milk sugar, lactose, so think glucose, sucrose, fructose, they all end in ose, that O-S-E, and that is letting you know that it is a sugar in there. So these sugars are different types. So glucose is your blood sugar, fructose is fruit sugar, lactose is milk sugar. And this lactose is converted into glucose and galactose, and then these simple sugars are converted into lactic acid. The process of forming lactic acid gives a little bit of acidity to the product, and that means its pH is about 4.5, and that helps to coagulate the proteins and set the milk, and that gives you that specific yogurty texture. Lactic acid fermentation can also produce different compounds that give yogurt its flavor. So things like carbon dioxide, amino acids, and peptides are all considered to be these types of fermentation compounds that are produced by that lactic acid fermentation. It's really what makes yogurt yogurt. Now, Greek yogurt not only has more protein than regular yogurt, but it also has less sugar and fewer carbohydrates than regular yogurt. So by straining off that whey or that lactose serum, it really helps there to be fewer carbs and less sugar. Regular yogurt has twice as many carbs as Greek yogurt does, but that only goes for that unsweetened or unflavored plain Greek yogurt. If you buy flavored Greek yogurt, that can add all of those sugars and carbs back into the mix. So, as always, read the label. Greek yogurt also has more fat than regular yogurt, and that's partly because we've removed a lot of the aqueous solution from it, that whey or lactose serum. The watery portion has been removed, and so now in order to fill that container, we need more of that really dense material that is considered to be Greek yogurt. So it's going to have a higher fat content just because in relation to how much water there is, that factor has been greatly reduced. And so it's natural for the amount of fat to increase in proportion, since you're still filling that serving container to the same amount. So for example, if you have an 8-ounce serving of Dannon's regular full-fat yogurt, it has 5 grams of saturated fat. But if you have a 7-ounce serving of the Phage full-fat Greek yogurt, there are 16 grams of saturated fat in there. So it's a good idea to go for low-fat or fat-free versions if you're buying Greek yogurt, and if reducing fat from your specific diet is what is important for you in your macronutrients. Now, everyone is different, so if you're needing to up your fat content, then yogurt, Greek yogurt that is, might be a good choice for you. Additionally, since we're talking about macros, a 6-ounce serving of Greek yogurt has just as much protein as 3 ounces of lean meat. So if you are vegetarian but not vegan, or you're looking to move away from meats for any reason, then eating some more Greek yogurt could be a great replacement for you. Will you have to eat twice as much Greek yogurt as you would lean meat? Sure. But there are ways to make it tastier, like maybe popping it in the freezer for a little bit, or adding in some granola if that's your jam, or some whole fruit. Remember, it's going to also help you to process any of the sugars that are there. Greek yogurt has less sugar than regular yogurt typically, but you can always do with some more fiber in your diet. Go ahead and give that probiotic gut health boost a double punch and add some fiber into that yogurt to help you out too. Plus, it's going to keep you fuller for longer than regular yogurt will, Greek yogurt that is, because it has more protein and it also has a lot of fat in it typically. All around, it's pretty much a win when you are trying to calculate that into your macros especially. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the health benefits of yogurt, including and especially the role that probiotics play. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Differences between Greek yogurt and regular yogurt, and what the health benefits are for each of those. Now we're going to talk some more about the health benefits of yogurt in general, and specifically the health benefits that come from probiotics, those fermentation cultures that are put into the milk to turn it into yogurt. So we think of yogurt as a vehicle for probiotics, but really, without the probiotics, yogurt would not even be. So it is a required constituent of the composition of yogurt. Yogurt has a ton of health benefits. As we discussed in our last segment, Greek yogurt in particular has less sugar, fewer carbs, but more protein, and also typically more fat than regular yogurt. And whether you are happy or sad about that is just going to depend on your specific fitness goals. But there are very many health benefits to yogurt. In addition to that animal protein serving, and that's about 9 grams per 6 ounces of yogurt. And remember, you need about 6 ounces of yogurt to replace 3 ounces of lean meat. You may also benefit from other nutrients like calcium, vitamins B2 and B12, potassium, and magnesium. So I'm really starting to wish that I liked yogurt more. I have trouble getting enough potassium and magnesium sometimes because I don't like a lot of the foods that they're naturally in. So I may have to start force feeding myself yogurt, you guys. Talking to y'all about this today is really convincing me that I need to suck it up and maybe put some more of that in my life. Or maybe see if I can incorporate yogurt into other foods. Perhaps I can use it as some sort of baking substitute or something. That would probably kill the bacteria though, so perhaps not. We'll figure it out. My point though is that, as always, we want to be trying to get most of our vitamins and nutrients in general from our food. And yogurt can be a really great source of this. Vitamin B12 is going to give you more energy. That calcium is going to be really good for your bone health. But the thing that people focus on the most tends to be probiotics. So those probiotics are those friendly bacteria that naturally live in your digestive system. And as we discussed in our probiotics episode, most of your good bacteria in your body is in your lower GI tract. So a lot of these live strains are in these yogurt products, and there's been a lot of evidence that indicates that some strains of probiotics can help boost your overall digestive health. So a lot of times doctors will recommend those if you're going on antibiotics that could totally deplete the good bacteria in your body to help prevent you from having that issue and from potentially getting a yeast infection, because the good bacteria are pretty much what keep the candida yeast at bay. And if the antibiotics kills both the bad bacteria and the good bacteria, then you don't have that good bacteria guarding your body against the yeast overgrowth anymore. Even though the yeast is totally normal in that environment, it normally doesn't cause a problem as long as you have that good bacteria in balance. So when that goes awry, you can get a yeast infection, which is also why doctors recommend eating yogurt if you have a yeast infection. But very recently, we found that even the world of yogurt, with yogurt being an ancient food, has been incredibly commercialized. If you've seen the Activia commercials, you may be familiar with these products. But the Dannon Company owns both the Activia and Dan Active products, and they use trademarked probiotic strains. I have a lot of feelings as to whether things that are alive and medically beneficial should really be able to be trademarked, but that is a discussion for a different day. Activia, though, is marketed as being clinically proven to help regulate the digestive system when you eat it daily for 2 weeks, and Dan Active is marketed as being clinically proven to help strengthen the body's defense systems. But there was a lawsuit filed by a firm in California that states that this is massively deceptive advertising because they're saying that these products are clinically or scientifically proven to have these really great health effects when it's not available in other yogurts. So they are saying that their claims of being clinically proven are really more puffery because they are not necessarily better than other types of yogurts. So that's the argument made by this California firm. But Dannon does have these strains trademarked, and so they state that they are scientifically substantiated and clinically proven because they have had scientific journals review their specific types, and that these findings have been published in the scientific community, and also that millions of highly satisfied customers enjoy their products. And they think that that should also speak for itself. So we'll see how all of this turns out in the yogurt wars. But I learned today that there were yogurt wars, and now you know too. So we're going to talk a little bit next about the best yogurt for your health and how to choose that, as well as whether yogurt can treat a yeast infection. We've heard people recommend it, but honestly, is it true? A lot of women use yogurt to treat vaginal yeast infections in particular, although you can also get yeast infections in your mouth, and that is referred to as oral thrush, or also in your armpits or underneath your breasts, or if you are overweight in different creases of your body. Anywhere that moisture can really accumulate is where you may be able to get a yeast infection. And that moisture can come from sweating a lot, or sweating frequently, or not removing wet, sweaty clothes within a certain amount of time after you've worked out, and also having that lower amount of good bacteria in your body to allow for that overgrowth. There are tons of reasons people can get yeast infections, but I am not quite up to slathering yogurt in people's armpits without some scientific methodology behind it. So I wanted to get the answers for that for you guys today. The good news is that home remedies of yogurt are backed up by scientific research when it comes for treating some yeast infections. There are several types of yeast and bacteria that can build up in the genital area, especially around the vagina, because the vaginal area tends to be a very moist environment. And the yeast infection happens when one type of yeast multiplies way too much and goes out of control. That specific yeast is a fungus called Candida. Yogurt can be really beneficial to fighting this Candida overgrowth, and it can in fact be applied to the surface of the vulva or even placed inside the vagina. Now, you do want to make sure you are using an unsweetened version if you're going to do that. You don't want to make this worse in any way for yourself, so get the plain kind. Don't be getting fruit on the bottom types of yogurt for this. Plain, unsweetened yogurt is what we're going for. In order to use yogurt to treat a yeast infection, you also need to make sure it's a natural yogurt that contains lactobacillus. So no artificial sweeteners, no natural sweeteners. You are not adding anything sweet to this, whether through fruit or anything else. So the type that you get for this does matter, even if you're putting it on the outside of your body and you don't really care about the flavor. Healthcare professionals recommend either using your fingers to apply the yogurt or fill an unused tampon applicator with yogurt and insert that, throw it away afterwards. And if you are having some real discomfort with this yeast infection, they say that you can use it for cooling relief by freezing an unused yogurt-filled tampon applicator before inserting it. Make sure, of course, that you're not laying that down flat on anything in your freezer without encasing it in plastic wrap or a plastic bag, some sort of barrier, just to maintain the cleanliness of the exterior portion of that tampon applicator. But you can freeze it before you insert it to help you out. But why would we want to do this? Why would we use yogurt to treat a yeast infection? Well, in addition to soothing those symptoms, some women prefer it because they're worried about side effects that they can get from antifungal treatments, or they're worried that they may develop a resistance to those treatments. Also, the home remedy is more convenient and less expensive than getting a medical treatment, and that can also be very helpful. So socioeconomic status comes into play here when it comes to having access to healthcare in general, having affordable access to healthcare, or even having a ride to go to the medical facility, or having a medical facility open when you are off of work. Not everyone lives in areas that have a plethora of medical facilities, and it's something that we tend to take for granted in many places in modern America that are not necessarily true even for other parts of the United States. Now, the reason that yogurt is effective is because it has that lactobacillus bacteria. That is a very helpful type that lives in your gut, your urinary tract, and your vagina, and doesn't irritate those areas. So it's already naturally present in your body. If you're on antibiotics, or for whatever reason you have more candida than you have the good bacteria, that lactobacillus bacteria that's keeping the candida fungus at bay, then this can really help you out by just literally adding more of the bacteria into the mix. You're sending reinforcements for the battle of the bacteria versus the candida fungus. Additionally, lactobacillus releases hydrogen peroxide, which in turn kills the candida and helps stop it from spreading further and fights back that infection and spread of that overgrowth of candida. Applying that cold yogurt can help with any itching or burning sensations. There have been several studies over the years that have looked into this. Some have found that a combination of yogurt and honey can work really well to help pregnant women as an antifungal treatment alternative when they have yeast infections, because many pregnant women do get more yeast infections. There's a lot of hormonal changes going on, guys, and it really can mess with your body. And yeast infections are just something that happens with pregnant women a lot of the time. And that's according to a 2012 study. So honey is also a natural antimicrobial, but you do want to make sure you are applying that very specifically and talk to your doctor about it first before you attempt to do this, or check out that 2012 study to make sure you have the right kind of yogurt, the right kind of honey, and in the correct ratio. Another study found that yogurt may be more effective than clotrimazole, which is an antifungal cream that is commonly prescribed for yeast infections. Keep in mind that this evidence overall is supporting the use of yogurt for internal or topical treatments rather than dietary use. So you very well may be able to spread this yogurt into your armpits. I've not seen any studies specifically for armpit candida overgrowth, but if you have it on different parts of your body, you might as well give it a shot. It's not going to hurt anything except for maybe putting some weird stains on your clothes and making you smell a little funny. So definitely do it in your downtime at home. But it seems that if you're able to put it in the vaginal and vulvar area, then you very well may be able to put it on your armpits or in the area underneath your breasts, where if you have larger breasts in particular, you may sweat more. So if you get a yeast infection in a different place than what people normally associate with yeast infections, give it a shot. It seems it may be more effective topically and internally rather than through being eaten anyway. Also, in 2006, a review found that probiotics have shown promise in preventing yeast infections. So it can help to keep those balances of bacteria and candida really in check, but they concluded that they need more research before they can totally recommend it as a treatment. So the TLDR of this is that if you're going to try it, You need to make sure you're getting plain yogurt that definitely has lactobacillus in it, because that's a specific kind that you need, and that there are no natural or artificial sweeteners in the yogurt. You also want to make sure that there's no added sugar at all, because Candida feeds on sugar. So it will not only not work, but it will make the infection worse. Lastly, while yogurt may very well be effective, it may not work as quickly as traditional antifungal treatments, and it may not necessarily work completely. It's going to depend on how well you follow the instructions, how strong that infection is too, and also what the specifics of your individual circumstances are. But overall, you can go ahead and try it according to the experts I have researched today, and start eating yogurt as a preventative measure to keep that lactobacillus in your body, or use it topically or internally to treat yeast infections that have already occurred. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about how to choose the best yogurt for your health, and also discuss the top best probiotic yogurts according to nutritionists. Stay tuned.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Talking about the health benefits of yogurt, particularly as they relate to probiotics and yeast infections. Now we're going to talk about how to choose the best yogurt for your health, and wrap up with the best probiotic yogurts that will keep your gut healthy. So, yogurt in general is typically marketed as being a healthy food, but if it's coming with M&Ms on top or crushed up cookies and things like that, a lot of these additives or even just sugar and flavorings that are added in and aren't even stir-ins can really make yogurt a lot closer to being junk food, more like ice cream, than it is healthy. So a lot of these products will market them to you as being something that your kids or you will love and be healthy, because we associate yogurt with health, but that doesn't necessarily make it so. Reading those labels is going to be your key to helping you figure that out. But first up, in order to assist you with knowing what to look for on the labels, we are going to discuss the ingredients list and a few things that are good and bad to look out for. In addition to sugar and flavoring, a lot of yogurts also add dyes, stabilizers, and preservatives to help it look more appealing or to help it stay shelf stable for a lot longer. So whenever possible, you want to choose a yogurt with the least amount of added ingredients. The fewer ingredients your yogurt has, typically the better it's going to be for you. The ones that you're looking for that you do want are milk, those bacterial cultures that they use to ferment the milk into yogurt, and then not really much else. So you want to see the milk and then those probiotics, that lactobacillus, and so on. Ingredients are also listed by weight, typically. So you want to avoid the yogurts that have sugar listed near the top. So if you are just going to eat this yogurt just for general health and wellness, make sure that if it does have sugar on it, that it is listed down closer to the bottom. But if you can avoid any sugar added altogether, that is even better. And it's imperative if you're going to be using it topically or internally. Now remember that there are many different types of sugar, and so it could be listed as high fructose corn syrup, fruit juice, sucrose, cane sugar, even agave nectar. So keep an eye out for these different types. That sucrose is 55% fructose and 45% glucose. So remember that has a disproportionate amount of fructose in it too. The high fructose corn syrup, not going to be super great for you. You need more fiber in your diet to slow down the digestion and not mess up your body's metabolic processes either. So if it says it's added fruit juice or sucrose or high fructose corn syrup, all of that means that you definitely need more fiber along with your diet of whatever you're eating here to help you process it. So whether that be some really good wheat toast or some other type of fiber like some granola, etc., consider adding that in too to help you process those sugars in a way that's going to help give your body its best shot. In addition to that ingredients list, you also want to check the nutrition facts on the label to get you some specific information like your macros on it, how many carbs, fats, proteins, and also sugars are in each serving, and it'll tell you the serving size and the calories too. Now you may have more than one serving per container, and that means there are more calories in that as well. So you can multiply the calories and the other components by however many servings are on that container to see how much you would truly be eating if you ate the entire container. Now I know it does not make a lot of sense to go, well, yes, who's going to eat half of a container of yogurt anyway? But they're allowed to list things that way. So definitely check it out because it may be misleading while still technically being legal and allowed. Now, the nutrition label right now as well does not distinguish added sugar from naturally occurring sugar. And that can make it really hard for you to tell how much sugar has been added versus how much of it was naturally already in the product. But labeling guidelines change not all that infrequently, and it's also changed recently to indicate to us the grams of added sugar per serving on future labels. So hopefully we will be seeing that as a mandatory component of these labeling guidelines here in the near future. A lot of times when these rules go into effect, whether they be new laws or new guidelines for our food or anything else really that's federally regulated, the government will give people like a year or sometimes more in order to begin complying. So remember, they put all of these preservatives and stabilizers into this yogurt to help keep it stable for longer, keep it fresh for longer, so they can make more money. And so they've also been keeping these refrigerated and stored before they come out to you too. So they have a lot of back product as well. So they don't want to go, hey, well, we just decided that this is no longer legal or this is no longer allowable, so now you have to throw out all of that product and start fresh. They instead tell them, okay, we are making this go into effect on this date, and you have 1 year from this date, or 2 years, or however long, to start complying with these laws. You may be familiar with that from our conversation about oils and fats. But it works very similarly in many different realms of government, not just what goes into our bodies. But that's the most relevant example that I can give you. So hopefully we'll see this on all labels in the future, so we can see exactly how much of it is added versus how much is naturally occurring, even if we have to subtract the added from the naturally occurring ourselves. That nutrition information will also tell you about vitamins and minerals that are in your foods. So calcium and vitamin D, they'll tell you how much per serving. So just like we can multiply the not so great things by the serving size per container, we can also do that with the good things and see exactly how much calcium and vitamin D we're getting, or how many of our macros we're getting. We want our yogurt to ideally contain vitamin D and a significant portion of your daily calcium needs. And that's generally indicated by that percent daily value, that percent DV that is on the label. That's how much doctors in general are recommending that you get each day, and how much of that individual serving of yogurt will give you based on that amount. So if it says 20%, and there's 1 serving per container, then sweet. You only need 80% more of your calcium for the day to meet the recommended daily values. Now, I used 20% as an example, but yogurt is actually the most bioavailable source of calcium of any food, according to some of the research I conducted this week. And an 8-ounce serving of yogurt has about 30 to 40% of your daily value for your calcium requirements. So you can get those B vitamins, but also a significant portion of your calcium, in addition to those probiotics. As a bonus, the bacteria that are already in yogurt to help you with that fermentation process and to help with your gut bacteria that also fight IBS, traveler's diarrhea, eczema, allergies, upper respiratory infections. Those same bacteria also produce lactic acid, and that helps you to absorb your calcium and your B vitamins. So yogurt can really help you make the most out of your meals and out of your nutrition. And that's really what a lot of nutritionists back up. So we want to look at not just research by doctors per se. We use doctors as a catch-all term like we do with scientists, but there's so much diversity within these fields. Nutritionists and dietitians really specifically focus on the nutrients that we're getting from our food and what we put into our bodies and what that input can really do to benefit our bodies. So a lot of folks will say they're very pro kombucha. I don't like mushrooms, and so I do not like kombucha. I've tried it, and it's just kind of sour for me. So it's not something that I love, but if you haven't tried it, a ton of my friends love kombucha, and you very well may enjoy it. It doesn't taste like mushrooms, really, but it just has tasted very sour, all of the types that I've had. If you have a very tasty kombucha that is not super sour, then maybe hit me up as well on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and I will be down to try it and let you know what I think. I prefer kimchi, but that is just me. However, when it comes to yogurt, you want to make sure you check the label to see that it says live active cultures on it. And you're looking for Lactobacillus acidophilus, according to a lot of nutritionists and dietitians. So you've likely already heard of Lactobacillus acidophilus, and it's well known, especially when I was growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, as being a probiotic that supports overall good digestion and healthy blood sugar, and can even help prevent yeast infections. Acidophilus also produces lactase, and it can be really helpful for folks who have trouble digesting dairy products in general. So it's the kind that might be easier on you if you have issues with dairy. Granted, if you have a lot of issues with dairy, then talk to your doctor about that and maybe avoid this type of probiotic and go with more of a kombucha or kimchi for yourself. Remember that part of making these important dietary changes and these habits in our lives is making sure they're sustainable. So I'm not going to go on a kombucha diet because that won't work for me like it would for some of my other friends. Whereas a lot of my friends are not into kimchi, but I absolutely love it. I'm more of a savory flavor person than a sweets person, and that is just my individual circumstances and preferences. But that's also what would make a more sustainable dietary change for me. So keep that in mind about yourself and others when you're having these discussions or you're entertaining which types you might want. I am going to discuss a couple of the top recommended yogurts by nutritionists, though, here in our last few minutes, just in case you want to take some of the guesswork out of going to the grocery store. I know I get choice paralysis a lot of the time, and reading all of the labels can be very daunting if you're trying to do that for every single product. So also try working that in by reading a couple at a time, or listening to our episodes on meats and dairy labels, or on oils and fats to help you know ahead of time which types to look for and narrow down some of that research. So you're not reading 50 million nutrition labels and getting overwhelmed in the store. You can also try to just go to the store each time and read a couple of new ones. So one day do yogurts, and another day do milks. Another day do your oils or fats that you're shopping for. Things like that to help it be a more bearable task. Remember, we're not looking for perfect choices, just better choices. And in that way, the number one choice from womenshealthmag.com, according to nutritionists and dietitians, is Siggy's Icelandic Skyr. Skyr yogurt is from Iceland, and it's even thicker and creamier than Greek yogurt. It doesn't tend to have a lot of added sugar, and it does have that live bacteria that helps with your gut health and also with yeast infections. So do keep in mind that you want to make sure if you're going to use it for a topical application for a yeast infection, that it does not have any sugar in it. It doesn't have any added sugar, and you don't want any natural sugars in there either if you can help it, and also avoid any flavoring. Siggy's is a strained whole milk yogurt, so it's like Greek yogurt, but thicker and creamier. One serving of it has 130 calories, 4.5 grams of fat, 11 grams of carbs, 60 milligrams of sodium, 0 grams of fiber, 8 grams of sugar, and 12 grams of protein. And the type that they're reporting on that website is vanilla whole milk yogurt. So you can get that at Target and so on. But remember that depending on the different flavors, etc., that some of those nutrition facts may well change. It may not be the same amount of calories or sugar, etc., for different flavors of this yogurt. They also recommend Yoplait Light, and Yoplait Light does have a bit of sweetness to it, so check that out. It says they are also flavored with other natural flavors if you're getting the types that are flavored. So check out the plain ones if you are interested in that. And I just always recommend tasting your food before you add anything else into it. That's just a general rule that I learned growing up with parents who cooked for a living, and it's also just polite. Now, in this case, you're not going to offend the good folks at Yoplait who have made this yogurt. They're not here to see you taste it and go, oh no, this is not sweet enough. I definitely need like a wad of blueberries in here. But you get my point. If someone has made something for you, it's always good to taste it first. Mostly so you don't oversalt it or so you don't oversweeten it, but also so you don't offend the host by adding things and just assuming that, you know, this person never adds enough salt and things like that. Even if you know that they don't usually add enough salt, it can just be kind to go ahead and taste it first. In the case of these yogurts, though, it's just also a really good idea because they do vary widely with the amount of sugar that's in them. Number 3 on this list is Phage Total, and that is a Greek yogurt. We discussed the phage Greek yogurt earlier, and it has more protein than regular yogurt. It's thicker, but not as thick or creamy as that Icelandic yogurt, a skyr yogurt, which is also strained, just like Greek yogurt. It has 150 calories versus the 90 calories in the Yoplait Light and the 130 calories in Siggi's. So that's just up to you. It has more calories than the Yoplait Light, but fewer grams of sugar, and also 4 times that amount of protein, and almost twice as much protein as the Siggi's Skyr yogurt. So think about your macros and specifically what you're looking for. Also, check for the sodium in these. The total sodium in the phage Greek yogurt is only 5 milligrams higher than the 60 milligrams that was in the Skyr yogurt, but that Yoplait Light has 105 milligrams of sodium. So in addition to your macros, if you have high blood pressure or other types of sodium issues, then just take a peek at that nutrition label as well, because that sodium may very well be hiding in the strangest of places. I would not expect for there to be a lot of it in yogurt, but then again, I don't eat a ton of yogurt, so what do I know? There are several more recommendations on this Women's Health Mag website, including Stonyfield Farm Organic and Brown Cow yogurt in the top 5. But there are even more listed below that as well, and you can see where your favorite yogurts rank by going to womenshealthmag.com and checking out their article called The 10 Best Probiotic Yogurts to Keep Your Gut Healthy According to Nutritionists by Isadora Baum. I encourage you to check that out, see where your yogurt ranks on that list, and see if maybe you might want to try one that's a little bit healthier. Because, again, as always, we're looking for better choices, not perfect choices. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.